Hi, everyone. This is Kent Shardak with Leadership EDU, and we're an online resource that's dedicated to helping people and teams become their best. And so one of the ways we've been doing that is doing interview with folks out in the field, leadership people. And I've got another one with me today, Sarah Noll Wilson, and I'm really glad to have you with me.
I'm excited to be here.
Good. You know, I was thinking about this. You and I don't know each other super well, but when we do have conversations, I kind of feel like we just kind of jump in. And,
I was going to say, I feel like we're old friends, but then I'm like, we really haven't spent that much time together.
I know, but I always find it, the words I think about, I always find you fun and I find you very intriguing. So I'm really glad to be able to do an interview with you. So let's do this. Why don't you start by, introducing yourself a little bit by telling us a little bit about you and what you do. Let's begin there. Okay. So jump on in.
No, I love that. My name's Sarah Noll Wilson. Again, I'm the founder of a leadership coaching and consulting firm, and we really focus on helping leaders build and rebuild their relationships, navigate those complex situations in a way that will help themselves and their team members thrive. So when we do that through executive coaching, workshop facilitation, whatever kind of development support, gently nudging and encouraging people to work beyond their comfort zone. But that's the work we get to do.
Yeah. And you've been doing it for how long? How long have you been in that work?
Well, it's kind of a loaded question.
Okay.
I mean, I've been interested in training, development, teaching since I was in college. But the work specifically from a leadership perspective has been over the last decade or so. Mm-hmm. And then I did the work, I led the leadership development efforts at an organization for almost 6 years. And on the side was building this consulting firm. And we are just over 2.5 years old of being on our own full time.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, when I was getting ready for this interview, you and I haven't talked for probably a little bit over 2 years. And
it's been that long?
It has. Oh. And so I thought, well, I'm going to send you an email and just ask you, okay, what are you passionate about right now? And you email me back, and I absolutely love, how you responded. So I'm actually going to follow your lead with a couple of things that you mentioned. And so I love this. I was looking at my piece of paper here, and you're like, one of the things you're really currently passionate about is leaders becoming mental health champions. And I don't hear leaders kind of say, well, okay, let me talk about that very much. So tell me what you're thinking about. I absolutely love that idea and the topic. So talk about that a little bit, would you?
Yeah, no, they're not saying it, but they should, So, I personally have been passionate about mental health and understanding the consequences of when you work in an environment where you don't feel safe, and how that can exacerbate the challenges. But truthfully, it is because of the challenges we've been in during the pandemic that has really accelerated how important that is. People are all of us globally are experiencing this sort of extended, prolonged exposure to stress. We know that mental health challenges is increasing across the board. And I'm not talking, diagnosable illnesses, although we know those are up as well, but that we are fundamentally being challenged as humans in a way we never have before. And it's so important for those people who are in positions of power and authority to understand how to recognize signs in themselves and in their team members, how to create the space that's safe. It's, our worlds have merged, they've collided. Like, we can't leave it at the door. We have our whole selves here. And I've seen the impact that when you have leaders who understand, appreciate, and honor mental health, how different the team members are, how much more engaged they are, how much more powerful they show up compared to those leaders who don't acknowledge it at all.
What are some of the best ways or some of the things that leaders can do, though, that then help acknowledge that, and things they do for their people that really kind of champion their mental health?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that, so there's 3 things that come to mind. The first is to just talk about it and to just say it, like to even just say, I want this to be a safe place for, for us to talk about mental health challenges. Now, people might not feel comfortable going there until they actually feel comfortable with that space. So the first thing that I would really recommend is for leaders to take some time to educate themselves on the signs, what are some of the challenges people might experience, what might they observe, if they haven't had their own personal experiences with it. Obviously, it's different if they've had their own challenges, right? Because sometimes people who haven't experienced like maybe a full-blown diagnosable illness, but have experienced challenges, because we all have a brain, so we're all going to experience mental health challenges.
Right.
is just educating themselves so that they can see it, so that they can speak it. So that's one. Two, talk about it. You know, when I was diagnosed with my panic disorder back in 2013, I worked for an amazing, compassionate, open company, but I never talked about my mental health challenges, not because anyone told me I shouldn't, but because we never talked about it.
Okay.
It was never encouraged. It was never a safe space. And things really shifted once I started to share them. My leader started to share, oh yeah, I've experiences with anxiety and whatever. And then it opened up this whole different dialogue. So if you have personal experiences, to be able to share that. I was working with a police chief a couple months ago, and he said, you know, my guys aren't going to come and tell me if they're stressed.
Right.
You know, I was like, I appreciate that. You know, so one of the ways we can show people it's safe is by sharing our own stories, even if it's like an invitation to a question. And so what I shared with him was, you know, what would it look like if in your next kind of crew meeting, your team meeting, you're like, hey, is anyone else struggling with sleeping at night? I know I've been really struggling with sleeping at night. Anyone else struggling with that?
Yeah.
And it's a way that you can show this is what I'm experiencing and open up the conversation for other people.
Well, it sounds, I mean, the leader really sets the tone with vulnerability, right?
Oh,
I mean,
totally.
If the leader's not vulnerable, then it's really tough for other people to kind of follow in that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think the other thing is sometimes people get nervous when we talk about like, how do we create a safe space for mental health? Is they're afraid they're going to make somebody feel worse or like trigger something, or they're like, but I don't know how to heal them. And people have to understand it's not your job to heal anyone.
Right.
And it's not even your job to give them advice. That's the trap we fall into is we want to fix it. It's just your job to create space.
You're creating space. Huh.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, the way I hear you talk about it too, it's almost like we're just acknowledging our humanity.
Yeah.
Right.
God, isn't that a concept?
Yeah, that's a concept. There's an old, reminds me of an old book. I think it's a John Ortberg book. The title was like, everybody's normal till you get to know them.
Yeah.
and I thought, oh, that's such a great title, because the reality is we all have places of challenge, whether it's, like you said, on a diagnosable level, but just day-to-day kind of things.
Yeah.
For a leader to acknowledge that, then it provides safety for it. That's huge. And what you said is when you see leaders do that, you see changes in productivity, engagement. What else do you see happen with a leader who does that?
Yeah. I mean, there's a genuine, like an appreciation. And then again, like, because they're willing to share their humanity, that means that I can tell that they value my humanity. I mean, I've observed firsthand companies where a leader was really vulnerable. And afterwards I would hear from people like, oh, I just really appreciated that he shared that, or really valued the fact that she's so open about this. Yeah. And when that safety is high, right? We know that people are going to perform better. We know that they're, not hiding, they're not masking anything. They're not feeling resentful. They're not feeling fearful. All of those things that can draw our energy away from being really productive and creative. Yeah. We know that like high performing teams, one of the most important factors is safety, that psychological safety. Yeah. And that's not just being comfortable, obviously, right? That's also like safe to challenge and all of that. But part of that is, do I feel safe to be who I am? Yeah.
And it's tough to be safe to challenge. If you can't be who you are, it's tough to get into those places where you challenge and have good ideological discussions and things like that. And the interesting thing too, when I listen to you, is that, really, I know there's appropriate levels of vulnerability, but sometimes we tend to think about vulnerability or sharing about ourselves as weakness. And the reality and the research that you and I know, like with Brene Brown and others, is that actually that's a strength. Yeah. The strength that people bring when they're able to do that.
And I think, Dan, don't you think like sometimes I think people, when they hear the word vulnerability or transparency, they think, oh, I need to tell you everything that's in my, like deep consciousness. And it's like, no. There's some things that don't need to be shared.
There's boundaries.
No, there's boundaries. There's very much boundaries, but being able to own and say, I've struggled to, or I'm actually struggling now, is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
People are looking for that.
Yes, absolutely. It's kind of a tie-in, I think, too, because the other thing that you talked about, or you shared with me that you said it's kind of passion is about leaders and their responsibility to help repair relationships. Can you talk a little bit about that from a leadership perspective too?
Yeah. I mean, where do you want to start? There's so,
Yeah.
it's, you know, our success is as people is so largely dependent on the quality of our relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's always interesting to me when you hear terms like soft skills, or they're squishy, or they're fluffy, or they're
Yeah.
whatever. And it's like, oh no, that's actually the very thing that's going to set you up for success or not, you know?
Uh-huh.
And so it's really important that, again, I go back to when I think of leaders, there's leadership is an act, but it's also who are people in formal positions of authority, is
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, as humans, there will always be regrettable events. We will always have times when we miss the mark. There will be times when we're tired. There will be times when somebody is
Mm-hmm.
stressed about something, or you're stressed about something. And so we know in relationships, there will always be regrettable events,
Yes.
and there will always be differences, and there will always be, right, like disagreements. And so it's such a critical skill for leaders, people, again, in positions of
Mm-hmm.
power, to know how to navigate that, and
Yeah.
not just shut down, not become resentful, not avoid the conflict, but how do we actually be intentional about repairing that relationship so we can
Yeah.
be more productive and powerful together.
Yeah, and sometimes it seems like our leadership can get so agenda driven or task
Oh yeah,
driven.
yeah, yeah.
The
Well, so
focus of
much,
that.
it's so much easier to focus on the tasks.
Yeah. And then you kind of, you know, you can see, I think a lot of people can see relational dynamics going on, but we're sometimes just afraid to walk into that territory because it's like, it's a little less controllable than tasks.
Yeah.
So what am I opening up? But it's so important. Huh.
Yeah, no, totally. It's so much easier to focus on the technical
Yeah.
than it is the relational, because it, again, requires us to be vulnerable. It also requires that we might be wrong,
Yeah.
that we might have played a role, and that's not always comfortable for people.
Yeah.
And, you know, I do a lot of work, and, you know, and that's the focus of the book that'll be coming out in early 2021, which is about how do we free the elephant in the room.
You got a book
And
coming out?
yeah, I got a book coming out.
Sarah's got a book coming out, people. Okay, good.
I got a
Boom, boom.
boom, boom. There it is. Yeah, you're gonna add some graphics or
Yeah,
something.
love that.
And yeah, I mean, the whole focus is how do we stop feeding the elephants? Don't feed the
Yeah,
elephants, right?
yeah,
And part, and I bring that up from the standpoint of, you know, people will often just be like, when does it get easy? Like, when does it get easy? I'm like, well, it doesn't get easy, but it gets
yeah,
easier. And I
yeah,
say that because whenever we're dealing with relationships, especially those that are important to us, there's always going to be something on the line. There's
yeah,
always going to be a potential loss. There's always going to be a potential risk of being excluded. There's
yeah,
always that threat. And so we might not be able to remove the discomfort, which I don't think you should, because
right.
that means you're not like
Yeah,
in it.
yeah,
But we certainly can develop skills to navigate it.
yeah. Oh, very good. Tell me this. You know, I told you this when we started. We were talking offline a little bit. That you and I could probably just talk for a long
I
time.
know. When you said
I
10
know.
minutes, I was like, good luck, buddy.
But let me ask you this, just kind of as a roundup question, if you will. But thank you so much already, just for the human insight that you're providing around leadership. But one other, just kind of wide open one. When you think about like maybe one or two top leadership qualities, obviously the relational things that you're talking about, but any other things that stand out to you that are just a really important leadership insights for us to know that you can kind of leave our
Yeah.
audience with?
Yeah. When I look at the leaders who I've experienced and observed that are really great, not
Yeah.
only at leading projects, but leading people, there's always a consistent pattern, and that's they're curious.
Mm.
They are curious about themselves. They are willing to get curious about the good, the bad, the ugly about themselves. They're
Yeah.
willing to get curious about other people and their perspectives and what's important to them, and to get curious about the situation. And I think that we don't often
Yeah.
talk about curiosity related to leadership, but the reality is that not only do the great leaders have that, but when I look at the leaders who have struggled, who have had challenges, again, either leading the people, leading the
Mm-hmm.
projects, navigating change, a big trap they fall into is they make assumptions, and they have these
Yeah.
rules that aren't really rules, or these mental models, and they're unwilling to look at the role they've played in contributing to the situation. And so for me, I fundamentally believe that one of the most critical skills that sets a leader up for success is an ability to be curious, and curious about the hard stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's spot on. Spot on. um, Tell you what, I just feel like in a matter of a short amount of minutes, you just gave us some like huge nuggets for people to kind of just really to kind of go with and think about. And so I really want to endorse Sarah. I've had her over at my place of work to do some leadership training, and it was excellent. I get comments still about you. So you're a definite resource for people who are out there and wanting leadership coaching and advice and training. So really appreciate that. If you enjoy interviews like this, I encourage people to check out our website. You'll see a posting for it on this video to see more interviews like this, like with Sarah. Definitely want to encourage you to pursue Sarah's website. Is it just Sarah Noll Wilson? Is that what you're?
It's just, I mean, it's
I don't
there's a whole story behind it. You know, it's not, you know, it was like at some point I was like, I can't come up with a good name. So I'm the product right now, but that's evolving. I mean, we lovingly call it Snowco, but it's, yeah, it's just, it is sarahnollwilson.com, Sarah with an H, NOLLWILSON, or people can connect with me on LinkedIn or social media.
Good.
Always happy.
I encourage people to do that. Sarah, what a joy just to talk to you. So,
no, this is lovely.
Yeah, thanks. We'll do this again, okay?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, take care.